Episode 3, Into the Woods. The candlelight flickered against the stone walls of St. Benedict's Church, casting elongated shadows that danced as if mocking Evelyn's growing fear. Father Michael's words lingered in the air, each syllable heavy with an ominous weight. We'll need to go to the source. To the place where the curse began. The woods. Evelyn had always known there was something strange about the woods surrounding Ashcroft. Growing up, she had heard the stories, the hushed whispers of adults warning children never to venture too far into the forest. She had even caught glimpses of the tall, dark trees when she had visited her grandmother, but it had always seemed like just another creepy part of small-town folklore. Now, the idea that those woods held the key to stopping the whispering shadows made her skin crawl. Lucas stood beside her, his face pale in the dim light. He had lived with the reality of the curse his entire life, and it showed in the way he carried himself, cautious, tense, like a man constantly waiting for something to strike. "We can't just walk into the woods unprepared," he said, breaking the silence that had fallen over the room. "We'll need supplies. And a plan." Father Michael nodded. "I've kept some things that might help us. But nothing will guarantee our safety. The shadows are tied to the curse, and the woods, they are the heart of it. It won't be easy." Evelyn's throat was dry, but she forced herself to speak. "What's in the woods? What are we facing?" The priest hesitated, then sighed, as if the weight of his knowledge was too much to bear. "The woods are more than just trees and dirt. They're a boundary, an ancient place where the curse first took root. Long before this town existed, there were rituals, dark rituals, sacrifices made to the spirits that dwell in the forest. The shadows are the remnants of those spirits, twisted and corrupted over centuries. They feed on the living, on fear and despair, and they've grown stronger with every soul they've taken." Evelyn shivered. This was worse than she had imagined. The shadows weren't just some malevolent force, they were ancient, powerful, and deeply connected to the land itself. Lucas spoke up again, his voice low. "There's something else. I've seen it, something in the woods, something worse than the shadows. It's what controls them." Evelyn turned to him, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you mean?" Lucas's jaw clenched, and for a moment, he looked like he might not answer. Then, slowly, he began to speak. "I was a kid when I first saw it. I had snuck out at night, thinking I could be brave. I wanted to prove that all the stories were just that, stories. But then I heard the whispers. They surrounded me, coming from all directions. I ran, but I was too deep in the woods. I don't know how long I was lost, but eventually, I stumbled into a clearing. And that's when I saw it." He paused, his face growing even paler as he recalled the memory. "It wasn't a person. It wasn't an animal, it was something else. Tall, twisted, its form constantly shifting like it couldn't hold a single shape. It stood in the center of the clearing, and the shadows swirled around it, like it was commanding them. I don't know what it was, but I know it's the reason for all of this. It's the one pulling the strings." Evelyn's skin prickled with fear. The thing Lucas was describing sounded like something out of a nightmare, an ancient, malevolent entity that commanded the shadows. If it was real, then they were facing something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. Father Michael crossed himself, his face grim. "I've heard stories of such a being, though I've never seen it myself. The older villagers used to call it the Hollow Man. They believed it was the original spirit that controlled the curse. If it's still out there, then it's likely guarding whatever binds the shadows to this town." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The Hollow Man. Even the name sent a shiver down her spine. "And we have to face it," she whispered, the realization sinking in. Father Michael nodded. "If we're going to end this curse, we'll need to go to the heart of the woods, to the place where the Hollow Man dwells. There's an altar there, an ancient stone carved with symbols older than Ashcroft itself. It's where the rituals were performed, and it's where the shadows are bound. If we can destroy the altar, we may be able to sever their connection to the town. But how do we destroy something like that?" Evelyn asked, her voice tight with fear. The altar is tied to the earth, to the curse itself, Father Michael explained. It's said that only fire can break the bond, fire and blood. A sacrifice. Evelyn's stomach twisted. A sacrifice? Whose blood? Father Michael's eyes darkened. The blood of one who belongs to Ashcroft. Lucas tensed beside her. You're talking about someone giving their life. The priest didn't answer immediately, but his silence said enough. It's the only way. Evelyn felt like the walls were closing in on her. She had come to Ashcroft searching for answers, but she had never expected this. How could she ask someone to sacrifice themselves to end the curse? How could she possibly be a part of something like that? Lucas broke the silence, his voice steady, despite the tension in the room. We'll figure it out. But first, we need to prepare. We can't go into those woods without knowing exactly what we're up against. Father Michael nodded. I have holy water, salt, and some other protective charms. They may not stop the shadows, but they can slow them down. We'll also need torches. The shadows hate light. It weakens them, at least temporarily. Evelyn forced herself to nod. Okay. When do we go? Father Michael glanced at the small window, where the sky outside had grown darker, the faint glow of dusk disappearing into the blackness of night. We'll go at first light. The shadows are strongest at night. We'll have a better chance of reaching the altar during the day, though it won't be easy. Lucas looked at Evelyn, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and fear. You don't have to do this, you know. You could leave. Get out of Ashcroft while you still can. Evelyn shook her head. I'm not leaving. Not now. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. I need to know what happened to my father. And if I can stop this curse from hurting anyone else, then I have to try. Lucas studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. All right. Then we face this together. Father Michael moved toward the back of the church, gathering the supplies they would need for their journey. Rest tonight. We'll need our strength for what's coming. Evelyn sat on one of the worn wooden pews, her mind racing. The weight of the situation pressed down on her, but she knew she couldn't back out now. The curse, the shadows, the hollow man, this was all tied to her father's disappearance. And if there was any chance she could find out what had really happened to him, she had to see this through. The night dragged on, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional creak of the old church or the distant rustle of the wind outside. Evelyn tried to rest, but sleep was elusive. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shifting shadows from earlier, and heard the guttural whispers in her ears. At one point, she thought she heard something outside the church, a faint scratching sound, like nails on stone. She sat up, her pulse quickening as she strained to listen. The sound came again, this time closer. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She glanced at Lucas, who was sitting across from her, his eyes closed. He hadn't heard it. Evelyn stood, her heart pounding, and crept toward the window. She peered out into the dark, squinting to see anything beyond the faint glow of the street lamp. For a moment, there was nothing, just the stillness of the night, but then she saw it. A shadow, darker than the night itself, moved between the trees. It slithered like smoke, formless, but unmistakably alive. And it was watching the church. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled back from the window, her pulse racing. The shadows were still out there, waiting. Watching. They weren't safe. Not even here. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Evelyn knew that their time was running out. The shadows weren't going to stop. If they were going to end this, they had to move fast. The woods were waiting. And so was the Hollow Man. End of episode 3.